When I awoke from this dream, I was very confused by it. However, when I think about it, in the dream it seems to me that my mother and father have forgiven me for the things that I have done. And it seems to me important that the blood of all the violence that I had been part of, each time I killed someone, I was also a victim of that wounding. But that blood, the rain washing it from me, although it was a horrific dream, it left me with at least a feeling of hope that maybe I could come to terms with what happened and move forward with my life. I told Esther about my dream, and she said, as always, you know, it's not your fault, the things that you've been forced to do. None of this is your fault. Normally I would hate it when people told me this, but for the first time, I didn't quite believe it, but I accepted that she at least felt that way, that other people could feel that way. Now that day, the president of our camp, Dr. Kimura, he came and saw me and a few other boys because we had some visitors coming to the camp, and he asked us to do something to show them how far we had progressed. And I did a monologue about what life was like as a child soldier and how it was possible for kids to recover. And the people were very impressed by my speaking ability, and I began to speak for the center at various different functions, representing the center. And this also helped me move forward. However, at the end of my 6th month at the camp, a social worker, his name was Leslie, came to see me. Esther was there as well. And Leslie said that I couldn't be at the camp anymore, that I had to go out of the camp, I had to go and resume a normal life, and that he would try and find someone, a foster family, for me to stay with. Very difficult time trusting anyone. And so the idea of going and staying with a foster family, that did not sit well with me. I was very afraid of this and upset by it. I did not want to leave the camp where I was at now. However, what I told Leslie was that I remembered that my father had once spoken of his brother who was a carpenter in Freetown. And that's all that I knew of him, was that he was a carpenter. And so Leslie said he would go and see what he could do. And in fact, several weeks later, Leslie came back with a man who bore a striking resemblance to my father. However, I did not trust him at all. I did not think he was my uncle. However, when I started talking with him, tears started to flow from his eyes. And in my culture, the adult male simply does not cry. And when he started to cry, I was very much convinced that in fact he was my uncle. And over the next few weeks, very slowly, because the camp people have learned from a lot of their mistakes not to rush things, my uncle visited me, we went for walks, we got to know one another, and at the end of another month, I left the camp to go and live with my uncle and his family. When I was leaving, I went to say goodbye to my friends, and my friends saluted me as if we were still in the military. They called me their captain. However, I just shook their hand. I did not salute, for I was no longer a soldier. All of that was behind me, and I vowed that I would never return to that. The resilience of my spirit gave me the strength to not want to return to that madness. Some of the other boys didn't do quite as well as I did, but I had perhaps more help than they did, and especially having a family member nearby was helpful. So when I first went to live with my uncle, it was interesting. He had 4 other children. He called them his children, but in fact, in our country, often people raise the children of their family members. So none of these kids, they were all my cousins, none of them were his actual children, but he raised them as his own, and he and his wife treated us all as if we were their own children. We listened to the radio. We ate delicious, beautiful food with palm oil mixed in the rice, and I started to feel again as if I did have family. The oldest boy, his name was Ali, he's my cousin, and I stayed in his room, and he was a great friend to me. He respected order and discipline. He made me keep the room clean, which I respected as well. He gave me space and freedom, but he was also a good friend to me, and never once did they mention what I had gone through. I'm not sure if they knew I was a soldier, that I fought in the war, My uncle didn't tell them that, but I'm sure Ali at least figured some of this stuff out. I also started going back to school and no one would sit with me. They were terrified of me because it was clear that I was different from them. I think they knew that I came from this rehabilitation center and that I had once been a soldier. But I started to do okay in my studies and I was enjoying reading again and reading Shakespeare in particularly. And so things were going relatively well. My cousin Ali one night said, "We're going out tonight, don't tell Uncle." And we snuck out of the house late, and he took me to a pub, which is like in your society, is probably closer to the club. There was reggae music blasting, lights pounding. There were girls all around, and my cousin Ali left me by our table as he went to dance with some of these girls, and the music was so infectious. I began to bob my head, and in fact, a girl came up and grabbed me by the arm, and she took me onto the dance floor, and she danced with me all night. And in fact, we ended up dating for some time. And I did have a few girlfriends over the next little while, but as we got closer and closer, as they asked more and more questions about what life was like in the countryside, I inevitably pushed them away because I did not want to answer their questions. Around this time, unfortunately, the war returned to Freetown. What had happened was the rebels and soldiers had fought and killed each other and destroyed all the villages, getting closer and closer to Freetown until essentially Freetown was all that was left. And these people who had been killing each other and fighting each other and hating each other, they joined forces. It was all about who got what, and there was enough in Freetown to support everyone with a gun. So there was no rebels or soldiers. In fact, we called them the Sobels, combining the word soldiers and rebels. And they came in, and they took over the government, and they began looting the city, shooting people randomly, saying that they were the true government and they were going to restore order. But in fact, all they were doing was stealing, robbing, plundering, and killing. And so life in Sierra Leone, in Freetown, became almost impossible. I was tempted to join them. It was very dangerous. There was no food. There was no